we showed up at school and we were super motivated, flew a lot, and did real well. We were, like I said, they were flying us like crazy so we could get the experience to upgrade as fast as possible. And I upgraded to aircraft commander as a second lieutenant. So after less than a year in the C-9, well, I don't remember how many hours I had, probably 800 or 900 in the airplane at the time.
Wow.
And then I upgraded to instructor as a first lieutenant, which was probably about a year, maybe later. So, because they were really pushing guys through. And as a comparison, if I had gotten that KC-10, those guys are stuck as co-pilots. They didn't even get to upgrade because they're flying so little for 3, 4, 5 years. They were flying 200 hours a year, 300 hours a year. So I was extremely fortunate to get to upgrade so fast and collect hours and, go fly as much as I wanted. And later I became my last duty post was chief of IP flight, which is basically the chief instructor for the squadron. So my additional duty was to go fly some more. So I just flew all the time, and it was a great gig. I really enjoyed it.
So let's talk about the C-9. So what was the role of the aircraft? And I think it was based on, is it the MD-80, or is that correct?
Yeah, it's close. It's based on a DC-9. It is, in fact, it has the data plate. It says it's a DC-9-32F, which is freighter, because it has the big door on the side. But it was a modified DC-9 bought by the Air Force for aeromedical evacuation, and it was there were some differences from the civilian DC-9, but they were pretty trivial. We had a TACAN. The airplanes in Germany and Japan had an INS or two. The ones in the States didn't have any inertial nav or INS. It had a cargo door which opened up, and then a ramp would fold out so you could bring people in litters, stretchers on. And it had, I think, 44 seats max plus 4 stretcher positions, or they could reconfigure it really quickly to do up to 44 stretcher positions, depending on what patient load you're flying around. And we carried typically 3 med techs with us, which were like medical assistants, and 2 flight nurses. Occasionally we'd carry a doctor if there's somebody high risk on board, like someone who is having a premature labor issue or a burn case, something like that. They could reconfigure the airplane at any of these stops. You'd go through the day and they might take some stretcher positions off and put the seats back in, because we carried all this stuff in the belly of the airplane, and they were great. I mean, we'd do 20-minute turns all day long, and they were awesome at it. So we did all this aeromedical evacuation. We flew to all the military fields in the U.S. with 4,500 or more feet of runway. We flew to a lot of civilian fields, basically anywhere that had a VA hospital, like we go in Philadelphia International or LA International or all these other places that a typical military airplane would never show up at. So we were kind of almost doing the airline thing even before we were in the airlines. But we got a lot of broad experience. You'd go to an uncontrolled field in the middle of Kansas at night and and do a circle the land approach to minimums, which you would never do today. And then you'd go to LAX and you'd do 8 legs a day, pretty much every day, with very rare exceptions of like you had some really long transcon legs and you might not be able to squeeze 8 in your duty day. But flew a ton, carried a lot of sick people, a lot of injured people. DOD, mostly soldiers, sailors, airmen, and their families, dependents. We do a lot of global outreach. Somebody has a stove explodes in the middle of North Dakota or something, and there's no other way to get them to a burn unit. We'd take non-military people sometimes as well. A lot of that kind of stuff. It was super rewarding for somebody who liked medicine. That's one of the justifications I use to say why I should get a C-9. It's like, well, I was pre-med and my mom was a nurse and I really like medicine stuff. And so I really enjoyed that we were kind of doing our actual mission every day. Most of the Air Force can't say that, or a lot of the Air Force can't say that. We're normally not at war. We're not actually dropping live bombs on targets every day. But, we were carrying sick people and injured people around all the time, and it was super rewarding to get called out in the middle of the night, go pick up somebody who was very, very ill or very, very injured, take them down to the burn ward in San Antonio or whatnot, and they made it. That was awesome. It was just a great gig. I loved that part of it. And the people I worked with, the med techs, the nurses, they were all awesome. They were very good at their job. They knew how to keep the operation moving, and it was an extremely positive experience. I'll put it that way. I think it was the best assignment I could have gotten out of UPT for sure.
And as a pilot, did you ever get involved, in the back with the meds and stuff like that, or were you just basically the pilot?
You were the pilot first and foremost, of course, but typically on a quick turn, as the aircraft commander or instructor, whoever, if you were a pilot in command, you'd run into base ops, you'd check the weather. This was long before apps or anything. You'd check the weather, you'd get a good weather briefing, make sure you knew where you were going next, and you'd make sure you had the fuel to do it, and quick, because we filed our flight plans all once in the morning, so it was like 8 stops on the single flight plan, so it just stayed open all day. Really didn't have to do that, it just had to pick up our clearance. And then you'd come back out and just see what needed to be done. The airplane was super easy to pre-flight. And normally the co-pilot would have that done, with the flight mechanic. If they were getting fuel, they'd have that done by the time you step back out. And, 10 minutes later, you were back at the airplane. And if something needed to be done, you just get it done. And it's like, I've helped carry, people on and off the airplane, help secure them. If somebody needed a hand, whoever was there, whether you're the aircraft commander or just, somebody that was standing there that was not doing anything else, would just help. And, the nurses were very in charge of the patients, and that was fine. It's like I was in charge of the whole thing, but, when it came to patient care, we defer to their judgment. And if they thought, we needed to go do something else or have another plan or maybe divert to someplace else, we'd do that. And it really worked very, very well. It was a very efficient team.